Hello and welcome everyone to our webinar. Today we're talking about what diverse families need to be physically active. My name is Rita Koutsoudiimos and I'm the Executive Director of the BC Alliance for Healthy Living. I'd like to start by acknowledging that this webinar is being broadcast from the traditional territories of the Squamish, Musqueam, and Tsleil-Waututh First Nations, and I myself am joining from the Sunshine Coast on the unceded territory of the Squamish and Sechelt, where I have the privilege to live and raise my family. And I want to express my deep gratitude and respect for the people who've stewarded these lands and waters since time immemorial. And our organization, the BC Alliance for Healthy Living, remains dedicated to working with Indigenous partners and communities in the journey to reconciliation to bridge health inequities. I also want to take a moment and acknowledge that today is a day of mourning for the community of Tumbler Ridge. And our hearts just go out to the children and families and the entire community who have been touched by the tragedy and who are facing unimaginable tragedy and loss. It's absolutely heartbreaking. And yeah, I think we're all, the whole country is united behind that community, but what a deep, horrible tragedy. So we do so appreciate you being here today to explore what's needed to make physical activity more accessible to all British Columbians, particularly equity-deserving families who face multiple and intersecting barriers. And so it is nice that we are talking today about how do we create communities where we're more inclusive, where we're creating those social supports so everyone in the community can feel welcome and healthy and connected. Um, and so we know those multiple intersecting barriers include things like cost and transportation, discrimination, accessibility, and whether there's culturally relevant or locally available fund programming. But everyone deserves, especially children and youth, to have activities that make them feel strong, healthy, and happy. So as we begin the webinar, we want to let you know a few things. Please use the chat throughout the session to share questions for our speakers. We'll end up having a Q&A after the presentations. And just so that we can keep a focus on our amazing presenters, we kindly ask that you keep yourself muted and your camera off so we don't end up with any distractions from our wonderful speakers. The webinar is being recorded and will be available on our website, bchealthyliving.ca, in just a few days. So that's a common question that we always get. The springboard for our conversation today is the Families Getting Active report, published recently by a group of organizations that make up the Physical Activity for Health Collaborative, which is stewarded or coordinated by the BC Alliance for Healthy Living. So the collaborative includes provincial leaders from across sectors, academic, health, sport, Indigenous, recreation, and their shared goal is to improve physical activity outcomes in BC. So going back, the collaborative has been aware of the data that says equity denied groups were less likely to be active. And so as a collaborative, we said, if we're going to make some kind of meaningful change, we really need to speak with people about their experience and how to go about making changes. So our report features the voice of families and youth from Indigenous, rural and remote, low income, newcomer, and refugee communities, as well as families with disabilities and gender and sexual minorities. The focus groups were held across the province, and participants shared about their experiences and challenges, but also their ideas, their recommendations for better inclusion and more appropriate programs or facilities. Conversations within those focus groups shows that, of course, families value physical activity. They want to be active. They want that for their children. They want that for their families. They just need some support and accommodation. So we also heard about the important role that programs play in social inclusion and connection, which you'll hear about more today. So this was a truly insightful consultation, and we are thrilled to be here with you all today to continue the conversation and get you excited about implementing these recommendations in rec centers, in sports programs, in community centers, and other spaces that provide activity programming. So each of our speakers today has touched upon the report in some way, either as a focus group participant, a facilitator, or a champion for the project. So I'm happy to introduce them now. First, we'll hear from Christina and Wendy, who will be sharing their lived experiences as families accessing physical activity. Wendy and Christina are peer representatives with the Center for Family Equity, which has been a great partner on this consultation. They've coordinated focus groups with their members, and the Center for Family Equity is dedicated to eliminating family poverty in BC by advancing evidence-based policy solutions so that all families can thrive. And they're just a fantastic organization. We love them. Next, we'll have Andrea Carey from One Ability Games, who will highlight some truly inclusive in-school play opportunities for children with disabilities. And, Andrea is part of Inclusion Incorporated and One Ability as an organization, another fantastic organization, just does amazing work. Finally, Kabir Hussain from Sport for Life will talk about some promising practices to engage newcomers in physical activity programming. And Sport for Life is one of the members of the Physical Activity for Health Collaborative, and Kabir has been a champion for this project and is, through his work, is a champion for solutions to make physical activity more equitable every day. So now, please join me in welcoming Wendy and Christina. And to make the most of our time, we're just going to put our presenters' bios in the chat, and then we have more time for the presentations. So over to you, Wendy.
Hello. I appreciate being here with everybody today. As mentioned, it's been a bit of an exhausting week for everybody, and my family is included in that. The reasons for our family that this has been such an exhausting week is that the government in the province and the Office for Children and Youth with Support Needs announced that they'll be taking away services from many autistic children in the province through dissolving the autism funding unit. And so I spent a lot of that day fielding calls from families that were suddenly thrown into crisis. All of our support families just suddenly thrown into crisis with this news. And then immediately following, the tragedy in Tumble Ridge occurred. So originally I had planned to be a little bit more polished with this presentation, a little bit more practiced, but that is very hard to do when your world and the world around you comes crashing down as it did this week. It's been very exhausting. So instead of being able to sort of run through these words yesterday, I spent most of the days, like I said, comforting families, speaking with stakeholders, and crying. I went through a lot of distress because of that, and losing sleep and just worrying about it. And then I realized that I didn't think people would be joining me here today so that I could present to them what is essentially like sparkling trauma. And I'm simply not able to put a sparkle on the traumatic week that we've just had. But I just ask that everybody keep in your hearts today the connection between social isolation and severe mental health concerns. Because staying active in your community has a lot of protective effects. And remember that many autistic children have just had the supports to enable them to stay active ripped away. Sorry, and again, I apologize if I get a little bit choked up. It's been awful this week. So before the tragic events of this week occurred, I had been very excited, and I'm still excited to be invited here. I wanted to join in on this webinar because I am very interested in staying active, and being able to stay active for families that have disabled members. And I felt very seen reading the report, and just to find so many barriers that I experienced mentioned, as well as so many sort of great recommendations to lessen the barriers, because there is a lot of barriers to staying active when there's disabilities in a family, especially when multiple family members have disabilities. So I'm autistic, I have ADHD, as well as physical and mobility barriers. I was born with hypermobile Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. It causes sort of full body loose joints and hypermobility. And then I was in a motor vehicle accident. So I use a wheelchair part-time and a walker. And I have found that my barriers then become a barrier for my child's activities because of her disabilities. So she's also autistic and has ADHD. And a lot of the time, active opportunities for her are completely dependent on my ability to create that access for her. And the assumption that parents can solely create that access for a child with disabilities is very harmful. Autism and ADHD, as well as Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, are present from birth. So my own experiences accessing activities as an undiagnosed youth were marked by the same barriers my child is now experiencing. So I was in a lot of pain as a child, and that led to self-medicating as an adolescent. And then that also created further distance between myself and opportunities to be to be active. I had played softball for a lot of years, and you just get caught between the two worlds, and you usually let the one that has more barriers go, which was playing softball. So as a family now, it's hard to access active opportunities that don't create medical distress for either myself, my child, both of us, or another family member. People with conditions like autism were not able to be as flexible to achieve an opportunity. And we really should never be pushed past our capacity in order to access active opportunities, because that does just create a cycle of medical distress and then further like ostracization from being able to join in. And families with disabled members are often put into medical distress trying to exist in society, which then affects our behavior and our ability to cope. So we're already extremely isolated and experiencing constant medical distress, and then trying to access the community, it just isolates us further, and creates barriers to active opportunities because we don't hear about them from friends and family because we're already isolated. We just don't even know things are going on to be able to try to find a way to join in. When an opportunity does exist that would be a benefit, families like ours begin the traumatic journey of trying to join in. So for our family, that begins with finding out if the venue is even accessible for me. Is there plentiful, accessible parking? Is there ramps? When we can get into a venue, we then need to assess for sensory accessibility before, during, and after the activity. It can be especially difficult because the definition of accessible is not well understood by those outside of the disability community. So we can run into things like dangerously steep ramps, narrow doorways, and more. The gymnastics dance studio my daughter attends has a steep service ramp with no handrails, and the dance studio is up a long flight of commercial stairs with no ramp or elevator. If we luck out and the venue is physically accessible, including sensory accessibility, then we have to figure out financial accessibility. And I am a CLBC client, so during all of this, I'm also budgeting my support hours because no CLBC member gets the support that they need. We are all in a deficit. So I'm trying to budget my daughter's supports and my supports, as well as the financial cost of the activity itself. So many activities do now have sort of bursaries or financial support, but there's often barriers to accessing those supports as well. There's often lengthy, invasive paperwork. And so that doesn't create accessibility. It's almost just like adding another barrier and shame to the families most in need, who will not be able to fill out all the grants necessary in a way to be chosen. And we shouldn't need to compete. Like, we already live in fight or flight enough, sort of just in general. Previous to this year, I had always tried to rent a home with a yard, precisely because my daughter and I have a difficult time getting out. But the financial housing crisis has caused the financial difficulties to be so bad that I'm not able to do that anymore. And that means staying active in our community is more important for us than ever. If by some miracle we can find an active opportunity that still has financial, physical, and sensory accessibility, we still have to hope the opportunity is culturally accessible. So the Fraser Valley can unfortunately still be very discriminatory towards visibly queer people, and this can make community activity opportunities unsafe and inaccessible. I've lived urban, suburban, and rurally. Different types of communities will have differing levels of these barriers, but all of these barriers were present in each type of community. And although there's a lot of trauma involved in trying to access active opportunities in our communities, we still really need to be and do enjoy being active as a family. And so I'm really grateful to have been invited to join y'all today to share some of our family's barriers and lived experience trying to access active opportunities. You know, times are hard in the world right now, and we need community more than ever. So I'm really grateful for everybody's commitment to inclusion today. Thanks so much.
Oh, that's wonderful, Wendy. Thank you so much for sharing. Christina, are you here with us now? Are you ready to join in the conversation?
Yeah.
Great. Okay, please join me in welcoming Christina Karlik, and we'll put her bio in the chat as well. Over to you, Christina.
The video won't start. The host has stopped it. Okay.
There you
Um, Hi. Hi, my name's Christina Karlik. I live in Vancouver, BC. I'm Teltan from up north, but I've never been there. Um, I'm a single mom with 4 kids. One is an adult and 3 grandkids. The barriers to physical activities in my family, we struggle. So we struggle with, I struggle with intergenerational trauma. When I was 18, I was diagnosed with PTSD. So forgive me if my voice feels a little, if I get a little upset. It's hard telling this story. But the trauma started when I was a little girl, when I was a child, pretty much in the womb. Um, my mom's, my biological father used to beat my mom when she was pregnant with me. I was molested as a child. There was verbal abuse, physical abuse. There was bullying in schools. And then when I'd go home, there'd be more bullying. There's drug addictions around me all the time, alcoholism, living in poverty. And it was not easy living as a child in my home. It made it really hard to go to school and all that. And at 13, I started drinking. At 14, I started shooting up cocaine. And then from there on, as I got older, of course, everything escalated. Um, it was really hard to fight for my mental health. It was really hard to stay in present moments, dealing with negative thoughts from childhood. And of course, I was downtown East Side, had heroin addictions, was on a methadone program, crack addictions, and because of childhood molestation, there was prostitution involved too. So I started my healing journey back in 2016, not knowing how to live normal like other people. I was on so many prescription medications. I was on like 50 milligrams of Valium every day just to try and stop the negative thoughts and the visions of trauma. Um, sorry. And then I had my kids, and they're the ones that helped me want to go on and live a better life, right? So trying to get into physical activities after all of that was kind of insane. I'm trying to raise my family, my children on my own because all my partners were in the same state as me, addictions and all that. So I couldn't stay with the fathers and all that. I as soon as I started my healing journey, we were jumping from shelters to transition centers, and we're trying to find a home in Vancouver. And it wasn't easy. Uh, and then I was trying to get them to listen to me, but I felt like I didn't have a voice. I felt like nobody believed me. No one would listen to anything I had to say. They saw a drug addict, they saw an alcoholic, and they saw somebody who was no good. And they also saw an Indigenous person, a person who was brown, right? So there was lots of racism throughout my entire life, fighting the system, trying to keep my children from out of foster care. My oldest daughter, she was in foster care until she was 8 years old. And it was only until I started my healing journey that I was able to get her back. It was really sudden with my healing journey. It just happened. I went and saw a psychic, and he helped me figure a lot out that was going on in this planet and everything that happened to my people. But my motivation to engage in physical activities is really strong for my children because I've noticed it helps them, or not noticed, it helps ground us, keep us here with our mind and body. But I was when I was lucky enough to get into BC housing in a beautiful area near a rec center, and we got like 50% off there for the leisure access card, 25% off for being in the neighborhood. There's also moms to moms groups that I've joined, and they have been really helpful with a lot in my life. I also joined just recently Wish, and that helped my kids get into snowboarding, and that's just an awesome thing. Unfortunately, I tried snowboarding and I was going down a bunny hill, and I twisted my ankle. So, but I get to see my kids progress. There's big sisters, big brothers, but the only thing is getting through to all these programs and being in low income. There's a lot of running around. There's a lot of paperwork. There's a lot of burnout for me because I'm constantly focusing on my children getting into programs, and I'm constantly running around making sure they're making this program or doing this program. And then at home life, it's just chaotic sometimes because they were also diagnosed with ADHD, which I don't like drugs. And so I keep them in Kung Fu. And the Kung Fu has been a lifesaver for my children. It's calmed them down. It's helped them sit still. It's helped them focus better in school. And I'm so very thankful for that. So it's mandatory now that my children stay in Kung Fu, and it helps them with their mind, their body, and everything. But yeah, so it's not easy going through everything that I've been through. And I've used my Reiki healing journey to help me with the healing process, but it's still chaotic and everything. But yeah, I think that's it for me. If you don't mind.
Thank you so much, Christina, for being so vulnerable and sharing some of those tremendous barriers that I think a lot of people don't realize that aren't visible on the surface. And I just really appreciate your honesty today. So thank you. And I'm glad that you have Reiki and Kung Fu. Sounds like those things are making things a little bit better. Next up, I'd like to welcome Andrea Carey with One Ability and Inclusion Incorporated. And she's going to tell us about some inclusive play opportunities for children with disabilities. So over to you, Andrea.
Thanks so much, Rita. And just a shout out and appreciation to both Wendy and Christina for sharing your stories and sharing about the importance of physical activity for your families and some of the barriers you're navigating. And my hope with the folks that are joining us today in this call is that we all think about how we create better equity in our programs and kind of working through an assessment of programs to understand where those barriers show up and how we can work to support families and individuals to navigate them so that they have better access. And that's really the crux of the One Ability Games. And how the One Ability Games came to be was a recognition that the power of an event can drive social change across different systems. And in particular, in the One Ability Games, we're looking at disability inclusion in schools. And so I'm going to share a little bit about that. So the One Ability Games are an annual event that is set up to transform the disability experience. And I've spent a lot of my career working in the disability sports space and thinking about how we plan for equity in sport opportunities for individuals with disabilities. And so the games will really focus on social impact and thinking about how we use the games as a catalyst around equity and accessibility, inclusion and belonging, and connection and community building. And as we spoke about in the opening of this session today, that connection, community building, belonging are so key to how we move forward as a society and thinking about how we take care of people who are struggling in our communities and in our sports systems, physical activity systems, and in our focus this year, the school system. And what we know about schools is that there is a rapidly rising number of kids navigating disabilities in the school system, whether or not they have a diagnosis. And we need to really think about how we're supporting them to have successful experience in schools. And we believe that sport and physical activity opportunities in schools is a crucial way to help support their social connection and community within the school system. So what we've done is we've developed this annual games that will take place starting in May 2026. And it's an annual multi-disability, multi-sport program and event. And so the event happens in May, but the programming happens all year in a sustainable way within schools. And a focus around it is to resolve the gaps in the disability sport experience across different sectors. And in 2026, we're really focusing on the school sector, the education sector. In 2027, we'll put more of an emphasis on the recreation sector as well. And we've been working with a number of partners to bring this work to fruition. Again, we're really looking at what the social impact can be, how we build different layers of complexity around this and partnerships and collaborations to ensure that we're actually making social change through these games. And ultimately, we will have both regional disability games and an annual games to be a catalyst of change. So with our community programming, we have focused, as I said, on the education sector with annual ongoing programming for students with a range of disabilities. And we've been working with school districts in this year, primarily Lower Mainland and Vancouver Island, but we will be scaling that out to other schools as we go forward. And supporting students to have opportunities to participate within the school environment and their school day. And we created a number of resources that I'll share in a minute that help support educators, whether that's a teacher, an education assistant, a volunteer in the school system, or a parent, anybody that wants to take on this work to be a champion to help bring regular physical activity and sport opportunities into the school day. And then leading towards kind of a celebration opportunity through the games experience. We've really worked around connection and collaboration as we've developed this programming and these games. We created an educator champion network last year, and that educator champion network really helped us create the resources and tools that we then have brought forward. We have another educator champion network that is now meeting this year and working on the implementation of these resources and working on preparing their schools to come to the One Ability Games. We've been building the capacity of leaders in schools through these easy to use resources and also delivering professional development opportunities, supporting them to find grants if they want to buy equipment or have additional capacity in their schools. And also looking at where there's other work happening that's similar and how we can connect them to that so that we start to maybe channel people towards existing resources and not think that we need to duplicate things that may already exist. So we're a bit of a connector and a catalyst. And the One Ability Games and these regional events, which I'll share, are really a catalyst for people to move forward. And we've had really great support from the school districts we've been working with and a lot of enthusiasm because they know that they're not doing a great job of including kids with disabilities in sport and physical activity opportunities in their school. They know what the benefits are, but they've been sort of stuck in how to get started. And so we're creating a bit of a shift in terms of getting them going on that journey. So we have what's called the Play Resource Hub, which is really around how we support disability inclusion in schools around sport and physical activity. And it is a series of resources that are open source. They've been co-created with BC educators. So the educators told us what they needed and how it would work to deliver these in their schools. And we teachified a number of resources. We created a new word last year to make them really simple to access and simple to use. And again, easy to share also. And we have then been supporting wherever they have other gaps. And so again, kind of taking that equity-based approach, looking at like, what do they need to be successful so that they can serve equity-deserving students in their communities and in their schools. So the Plea Resource Hub really has sort of three features to it. It has getting started resources. So things like a letter of invitation that can be sent out to schools or to families to be a part of it, an intro presentation that orientates them to what this is and what the games are, a 6 steps to get started resource that really walks them through how to get going, a draft waiver, and a leader training presentation. And then we have our sport activity plans. There's 6 sports that we worked with to create these resources. And we took existing sport resources and added in PAHC Canada's STEP framework, which looks at space, the task, the equipment, and the people, and suggests a number of modifications for a range of different disabilities. And then also connects them to pictures, videos, and other supporting resources for learning. And then there's a professional development section, which we're just adding to right now, that has both in-person and online training opportunities. And if you take a picture of that QR code that's there, it will take you right to the Play Resource Hub. So if folks want to have a look at that while we're chatting, happy to share that. So the One Ability Games will take place, as I said, in Richmond, but we'll also have community events. So our play stream, which connects to our schools program, will be for kids that school-age participants K to 12. And we're really connecting that school programming with the attendance at the games, but you don't have to participate in the school program to come to the games, but we do want to sort of see that momentum build year over year so that more programming is happening in schools. And then our Achieve stream is competitive sport events. So we're working with sport partners in the national sports system and the provincial sports system to host other events with the idea that kids coming for the play stream can then see what's possible for other sport opportunities as they go forward and to meet some athletes and appreciate that there are sport pathways for them to follow. And we know that youth with disabilities often don't get to take part in some of the existing school competition opportunities. So this is a place that's dedicated for them to come and play, meet kids like them that might have similar lived experiences or be facing similar barriers, and really celebrate who they are and how they show up in the world and celebrate their abilities. So the play stream will take place over 3 days, with different days allocated for different grades. And we're really drawing in this year on the 15 to 18,000 students with disabilities in the Lower Mainland within a 90-minute radius of the Richmond Olympic Oval. The sports they'll take part on is track and field, soccer, floorball, wheelchair and adapted basketball, and lacrosse. And each of those sports will be set up so that there's a variety of different adaptations to ensure that each child, regardless of their abilities and disabilities, will have a successful experience. And then we also have regional events, which year over year we look to expand these regional events to more places across the province. But we'll be hosting a regional event in conjunction with the Comox Valley School District on May 20th, Surrey in May, Greater Victoria May 28th, North Vancouver June 16th. And our Chief stream is going to take place in parallel, as I said. So we have Wednesday, Thursday, Friday for the play stream, and then the Achieve stream is Friday, Saturday, Sunday. And we'll be hosting Goalball Nationals, Canadian Blind Hockey's doing a BC Cup, and wheelchair basketball is doing a nationals. So we'll have men and women for both those national competitions. And really, the games, as I said, are kind of that moment, and we're building this movement around it. So, really thinking about how the lead up of the games, getting schools organized, building better social connection across schools, building better sport delivery in schools for kids with disabilities, supporting more volunteer awareness, better disability awareness and accessibility, moves into building a legacy, and then it sort of becomes this self-fulfilling movement as we go forward year over year. And we know that sports have an incredible impact, and it opens doors, including education and employment, creates sport pathways to motivate participation, and with the two streams side by side, having dedicated athletes that can be role models, and that social impact of sport grows when systems collaborate to ensure accessibility for all. So that's really what we're dedicated to doing, and would welcome any questions or comments in the chat, and we hope you'll join us.
Wonderful, Andrea. And I'm certainly planning on joining you at the games. I've got that in my calendar, and I think it's going to be a really exciting event. But more exciting is the work that you're doing to keep that momentum going on and build that culture within the schools. It's wonderful, wonderful programming. So yes, please, everyone, put your questions in the chat. And next up, it's my pleasure to introduce Kabir Hussain with Sport for Life, who's going to speak to us a little bit about some of the work that they do to engage newcomers and refugees in physical activity programming. So over to you, Kabir.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. Great to be here, everyone. Thank you to the previous presenters. Awesome job so far. And I'm hoping today that I could just layer on and support each other and empower you folks when supporting equity denying families. Uh, so, you would see in your chat box, there's a link for a web page which includes resources and articles that can support you when engaging those who are new to Canada. Simply put, our goal with creating these resources are to support families that are new, to overcome barriers. Hopefully, we can aspire to dismantle them with an aim to flourish in Canada through participation in sport and physical activity. And that's what this graph and maps out through creating that pathway. When newcomers arrive, when we arrive in Canada, our first points of engagement often are with settlement agencies and supporting groups such as the intercultural associations. Despite available support from various organizations and associations, we newcomers face many barriers as we begin our lives in Canada. Participating in sport and physical activity can play a big role, helping us overcome these barriers and experience the many life-enhancing benefits that come when participating in sport and physical activity. But the broader impact of all forms of physical activity on community connections, social integration, well-being, just reinforcing how inclusive programming can support us newcomers build relationships, develop language skills, and feeling at home here in our community in Canada, which in fact are the intended outcomes of Canada's immigration plan. With practical strategies and real-life stories and evidence-based recommendations, this pathway is a valuable resource for all stakeholders, for all you champions that are on this call today, to support newcomers to thrive, with a big focus on thrive, which is why I've sort of highlighted that particular term on this map. So today I'm really hoping to provide you with some recommendations and examples that are grounded in current evidence and data across sport, health, immigration, physical activity sectors, and recreation. The intent is to empower you to support a newcomer's journey with the specific goal to ensure newcomers have the opportunity to flourish here in Canada through participation in sport and physical activity, while the broader goal of for newcomers to experience overall personal development and for communities to blossom through this inclusion, which together will benefit Canada as a nation. So in terms of creating awareness, we newcomers can't participate in a program or a service if we don't know about the program, where it is, and most likely not see persons from our community represented. So here are a few tips. Ensure that it is culturally appropriated, and you could do that through recruitment by building relationships based on trust and authenticity with those agencies that support newcomers. Keep your marketing simple and your communications in the top languages that are spoken within the communities. Have members of your team be of those populations, of those newcomers within the community. And when you provide that inclusive outreach, do consider the first involvement, which is that experience, which is everlasting when persons do come to your programs or you bring programs to newcomers. So here are some more tips around that piece. It's very important to consider athletes with disabilities. And Andrea spoke about that previously, and there's lots of great recommendations. Provide an enjoyable first experience for many of your participants because you want them to return and you want them to have a very fun experience so they continue participating and they're sustained in their program. Create a welcoming space and have a welcoming team so that they could relate to the population and having those pieces of knowledge. And continuing with tips, this is sort of a four-step process that we recommend where you understand those barriers, seek potential solutions, and consider opportunities because quite often the solutions may already reside within the community. It's about setting the stage for inclusion and unsiloing those silos. The intent is to become more inclusive, which in effect, without action, Canada needs more champions of inclusive sport and physical activity. So developing that action plan will enable you and organizations to make incremental changes. Collaborating with agencies and organizations committed to working with newcomers will harness that energy and willingness to make a difference. Lean into your discomfort, folks. We are going to make mistakes, but own those mistakes and, look for solutions. So I challenge you and I call on you who are engaging newcomers in sport and physical activity to have tailored, flexible, inclusive approaches at each stage. we newcomers come with various skills, cultural backgrounds, and experiences. So each stage must be has an emphasis on accessibility, cultural sensitivity, and support. Ensure physical activity is accessible, enjoyable, and sustained for everyone. Last but not least, and this is my son there having fun, it must be fun. Fun, fun, fun. And I encourage you to aspire and inspire your program participants to not only focus on development of skills and confidence, fostering a sense of belonging, but building that foundation for lifelong participation where fun is key. So I thank you very much, folks, for engaging with us today, and I hand back over to you, Rita, for some questions and comments.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much, Kabir. We just love that. Love that fun, 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 and that beautiful picture of your son. What a cutie. Um, so I'd like to invite all of our panelists to come on camera now. And we've got a few. We'll start the party with a question for Wendy. Is there a program or event that has felt inclusive for your family? One that does a reasonable job of addressing your barriers to physical activity?
No.
Oh.
Um, the situation is so unbelievably dire where I am and where I live that I could not even get to the playground at my daughter's catchment school when we first came back to Chilliwack. So I had to have an EA bring her to the uh school pickup line. So that meant that social opportunity that happens at the end of the day at the schoolyard, we missed
Yeah.
out on that every day because of inaccessibility. So uh I have to say truly not. I think one of the closest things was when the games park in Kamloops had the Canada Autism Network they're doing a
Yeah.
day. So they had like a sensory calmed area that was
Yeah.
just sort of come and go with some calm activities and fidgets. So it was geared to us. And then they are also um accessible for my wheelchair. So
Mhm.
that was the closest, but it's definitely nothing in like community events. I think the sort of the two more successful times that I did get to do a community event. One, it was outside somewhere that I was able to sort of get to with my walker.
Mhm.
Um, and it just so happened to be that I had a family member whose child was there. So again, it was we created the access ourselves.
Right.
And then the second one was just a civic event in Logan Lake, and the accessibility there was simply because the town is small. So
Right.
it just
Mhm.
happened to include sensory accessibility because it was a smaller event. And again, it was outside. So it
Right.
was where my wheelchair could get to. Um, so I think one of the biggest barriers for our family is the fact that we have demand avoidance in our family as part of the disability. So if anybody knows, I can see some faces of recognition there. It is a very difficult situation to navigate for people who live with it. I am one of them. And so I mean I've got a lot of experience overcoming it, but for the children, it's not very much something that they can overcome.
Mm.
It's more we need to change the environment to include them. So
Right.
we tend to seek out drop-in
Yeah.
programs
Yeah.
where especially if there's not a set time that it has to start. So like
Right.
daily open gym with
Yes.
a sensory calmed area that doesn't
Hmm.
need registering ahead of time. Like those are the situations that I would be looking for as
Yeah.
a like and similarly for other community inclusion things like if it's sort of like the morning at a
Right.
like family place, or the
Hmm.
morning at Strong Start, instead of when COVID hit, we only had um time frames that we had to try and arrive
Right.
during, and
Yeah.
a lot of them kept that. So that does make it, because my people with disabilities, like our bodies don't work on schedules the same way other people's are able to. That's the flexibility that I was mentioning. So we continue to seek out, but it is hard to sort of get all of the access needs met in one event, especially in communities that are still, like Chilliwack went sort of quickly from a smaller town to a bit of a larger town with COVID. A lot
Right.
of people moved out here, so we're sort of still, our infrastructure is still sort of growing. So hopefully I'll be able to see more soon.
Great. Well, wonderful answer. It's discouraging to hear that. I will note though that the idea of drop-in events with a larger time frame and without the obligation to sign up in advance, that was one of the strong recommendations that came across a number of focus groups. So that was a really strong report that we heard in the focus groups that was shared by a number of people. And I will also do a little shout out to the Canucks Autism Network, which does do training for all different kinds of organizations that are looking at supporting people with autism. And they do some work that is specifically for recreation leaders. So that's a good resource as well. I've got a question here for Andrea. Can you describe some of the ways that One Ability Games helps to overcome barriers to access to the day for families with both parents and children with disabilities? So I guess that's kind of a
Yeah.
uh, yeah, what Wendy's facing here.
Yeah, absolutely. So the registration to take part in the games for the students is free, so there's no cost barrier. If there's a transportation barrier, we'd love to hear about it so that we can help support and look at what options are in that area. We are supporting students with a range of different abilities, so we just want to understand sort of what accommodations or supports they need to be successful, and then we will make sure that those are available for them. Each of the sports stations will be set up with a range of different activities and adaptations. We will have a sensory space if folks need a quieter location to take a little time out or to have some other destimulation or stimulation. We will also have, it's in the Richmond Olympic Oval, which is a very accessible facility. And so that is also something we're really proud to work with them. And they've been incredible about working with us to figure out how we ensure as much accessibility as possible throughout the day. And we also have been supporting schools with, as I said earlier, some grants and others ways that they need to help get educators leading this work. And I'll give you one example that came up last year when we started our pilots. One of the school districts that we worked with, they actually had their leadership class. They trained their leadership class to help deliver the programming in the school. And that leadership class went so well and had such a positive experience that that teacher is now building curriculum that will go across leadership classes in the entire district. So some very cool kind of like additional ripples that are maybe going to turn into waves of how we do things. So
Oh,
hopefully
that's
that answered the
wonderful.
question, but
Yeah, that's wonderful. That's wonderful. It's such a difference when people who are involved in the community of the experience, that lived experience, are developing those programs. And I think that's a nice segue to a question for Kabir, which is, where can physical activity and sport leaders get trained in practices that promote inclusion of newcomers? Kabir, are you aware of that?
Yes, there are quite a few resources there, and I could provide some links to Kimberly, which we may be able to drop in the chat box, or provide a follow-up. But my first step would actually, I'll start with two recommendations. First one, no offense to everyone, but check your bias at the door. Forget about any preconceived notions of immigrants. And secondly, go to them. Go to the settlement agencies, the multicultural groups, go with an open mind, and have conversations, understand the landscape. There are many challenges. And the statistics are showing that in order for Canada to continue to be an economically viable G7 country, immigrants right now are the only positive growth for the country. Within the last 5 to 6 years, 99% of the country's growth has been attributed to immigrants. So have those conversations, keep an open mind. You're going to learn quite a lot. And often the solution or the opportunities lie by just connecting the dots. Hope that was a bit useful there, Rita, because I can do a full workshop on that piece.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks, Kabir. And yeah, we'll make sure that we share some of those links. And I will just put a shout out to any recreation leaders who are affiliated with BC Recreation and Parks Association who are developing a training and inclusion for recreation leaders called Pathways to Belonging. So if you're part of the recreation system, please look out for that because I think that's going to be a tremendous opportunity to addressing some of these issues. Um, I'm not seeing other questions, so I encourage you if you have questions for our wonderful panel, please throw them in the chat. In the meantime, I think I'll put a question to you, Christina, about how did you find out about that cool snowboarding program that you got involved in, and that seemed to be a real uh, uh, source of joy for your family.
Um, I got it from a friend of mine. I met her at Mums to Mums program, and I was talking about, I can't remember, we were having a conversation about programs, and yeah, just kind of, and she sent that to me, and I signed up. I just took the risk and signed up, and yeah, they got me into snowboarding, and the kids got into snowboarding, so it was really a good opportunity. So yeah, I'm
That's
really
great.
glad.
And who offers that again? What's the
I
organization?
think it's Wish program.
Okay,
I'd
Wish.
have to, I'd have to,
Yeah,
yeah, I'd have
yeah.
to look it up, but yeah.
Oh, that's great. That's wonderful.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's
It's
so
for,
nice to have
yeah.
that winter fun as well. And maybe you can
Mhm.
tell us a little bit about, some of the have you had programs where the application programs have been simplified, that have been easier than others? You spoke about your recreation center having a leisure access pass. How
Mhm.
was that process? Was that okay?
Yeah, that's all right. You have to go to the welfare place. I don't know what that's called, but yeah, and then they sign some papers and you take it to the rec center and they will give you a leisure access card. So yeah.
Okay, so it's still quite an administrative process then getting papers from one institution and moving them over to the
Yeah.
others. Yeah.
Hmm.
Okay, I have a question here from Asab, and this is for Andrea and Kabir. Thank you, Christina. What adaptations to your original programming have proven most effective in meaningfully engaging diverse communities? How do you ensure partnerships and engagement are collaborative rather than transactional or short term? So I don't know who wants to go first, Andrea or Kabir.
Andrea, you can go ahead first.
I was gonna lob it to you, Kabir. Rita, sorry, can you say the question again? Because I know there's a couple parts to it.
Yeah, it says here, one second. What adaptations to your original programming have proven to be most effective in meaningfully engaging those communities? And how do you ensure that your partnerships and engagement are collaborative rather than transactional or short term?
Yeah, great question. So one of the pieces in disability programming, both that we do locally here in Victoria, for youth with disabilities, and then what we're building into the way we're approaching the games is, I'm going to say, sort of a couple tiers of the registration process, not to make it cumbersome, but so that we can kind of really surface where there's those equity challenges that we want to be supporting individuals to be successful around. So, for example, in a program we run here locally, we get kind of the initial information from a family to register a child, which usually comes through like a Google form, but they can kind of call us or email us, and we can do that intake in a different way if that's helpful. And then we're also not charging a fee in that program, but then we have a follow-up call and discussion with the family to ask them what are other barriers that we need to support you in. And so sometimes that's gift certificates for them to get equipment for the child. Sometimes it's snacks. Sometimes it's transportation. Sometimes it's considering like how the space is set up or orientations ahead of time to the family to support them to know what to expect when they come to the program. So I would say those are some examples, and then we're building all of that thinking into how we're building out the One Ability games, both in how we support educators to know what to expect and how to set up planning for the day, but also information that goes out to families and how we're kind of running the registration and the planning for individuals there with a lot of intention around like we're trying not to ask things about like what's your child's diagnosis. It's like what supports and accommodations does your child need to be successful? What do we need to think about to ensure that you can come to the games? What do we need to think about so that they have a really great day and they feel really celebrated and supported in that environment? So it's trying to like flip the script a little bit in terms of how we've done things in the past that maybe feels like it actually is like digging in too much to some things people don't want to share, and just thinking about like how do we really set people up to have a great experience. So hopefully that answers that first question. Kabir, do you want to answer the first question, then maybe we can go to the second one?
Yeah, sure. And so, not to reiterate what Andrea indicated, but what we've also seen, in addition to providing the supports to overcome barriers, is like really looking systemically as how we could dismantle them and providing opportunities for newcomers to be coaches, to be recreation administrators, to gain employment within the sport, physical activity, and leisure spaces and places. That's something that we've been looking into. Unfortunately, many provinces, their systems are different, so it needs a tailored approach. But there's great buy-in to wanting to have those uncomfortable conversations.
And Rita, the second part of the question I think was around like collaborative partnerships and how we facilitate that.
Yeah, and just making sure that they're not just transactional, but I will just appreciate both of your responses to that first part. That's lovely to like really flip that switch, flip the script and talk about being like, what do you need? What's going to make you successful? What's going to be happy and celebrated? And same with you, Kabir, in terms of how can we ensure that it's from the community for the community. I think those are really important lessons. Yeah, just wanted to pause on that for a second.
For sure. Yeah, so in terms of partnerships, and I'm going to say more like transformational or meaningful partnerships versus transactional partnerships, I would say with the One Ability Games, we, as I said, really built this kind of educator network to go like, what are you navigating in the school? Like, what do we do to try and actually build this in a meaningful way? So it's not like us saying to educators, we need you to do another thing in your day. It's like, where do you have gaps and what support do you need to do this thing in your day? And we know that, many kids are in schools. It's one of the more accessible places for kids to be. I appreciate there are additional barriers still with schools, and certainly lots of examples where that's not working particularly well. But generally, a large population of kids go to schools. And as we stated earlier, well, 27% of the population identifies as having a disability. I would say anecdotally, what we're hearing from educators right now is that they're seeing 40 to 50% of the kids showing up with disability or mental health related issues that they're trying to navigate. So it's teachers are really struggling to figure out how to support that well. And so our conversation with the education system and with families is like, where are those gaps? And again, how do we sort of support you in that? And the super simple, like 1 to 2 click resources was like one of the first things the educators told us. And then also like that Pro D pace so they could kind of wrap their head around it was another one. Thinking about that many schools are really trying to think about what does social inclusion look like. So making the school program inclusive of kids with and without disabilities doing adapted sport together so that the whole student community starts to understand that adapted sports is actually what sport is, and that we're all making adaptations every day. Because I certainly can't run as fast as my daughter, for example, these days. And so we have to change things up to make it so that we can play together. So different things like that, just kind of thinking through like, how do we set the tone and listening to our partners, both with families and educators, to go, how and what do you need to do this well? And then let's kind of make that as simple as possible to deliver with you.
That's lovely. It sounds like you're taking the same approach. How do we make things easy
Yeah.
for you? How can we fill a gap? How can we support you? That's lovely. Very supportive, Andrea. Um, Kabir,
Yeah.
how about you? How would you respond to that
Oh,
question?
I would, emphasize the need for partnerships. And I mentioned in my presentation the partnerships based on trust and understanding with a focus of centering the newcomers' voices and leaning towards co-creation. In the immigration space, there are hundreds of immigration partnerships called LIPs. There have recently been ZIPs and RIPs, which is, zonal and regional. So for the rural communities, they brought together a number of hamlets to form local immigrant partnerships. In the chat box I just dropped in, I'm a co-director of a pan-Canadian initiative called CoPlay, where we are using sort of that immigration partnership model, centering the newcomers, serving organizations perspective, but bringing sport, recreation, education, healthcare, regional sport, meaning provincially, and in some cases national sport. And in each region, there may be the need to include local or municipality police, RCMP, as the case may be. So connecting those dots, unsiloing those barriers and working together towards some systemic changes, like that's where I think we can realistically make changes happen, uh, beginning with understanding what those barriers are, and the organizations that understand that are the newcomer organizations. And quite often, in these cross-sectoral partnerships, when these barriers are being articulated, the recreation team may be able to immediately provide a solution, but they were never connected before. So just as an example, and I could speak a lot more to it, but from a partnership perspective, those cross-sectoral partnerships centering the newcomer voices, my strongest recommendation in response to that question.
Excellent. Have a little follow-up question here. Can you give us an example of what that looks like on the ground in terms of physical activity? What does how does that fun activity look?
Yeah. And that picture, if I maybe pull it up on the screen again, but it's its own language, Rita and audience here. And this is where it's developmentally appropriate. Wendy spoke to something that's really, really key. We often look at accessibility as a physical domain, but then there's the sensory aspects to it. And so when you I love to look at it as a meal because I love to use my hands to cook, and each person has a different taste. So the outcome of fun is going to be relatively different. But if you get the right ingredients together, good people, good places, good program, which is definition of quality sport programming, uh, that's it developmentally appropriate for the participants based on their stage and age of their journey, uh, to make it inclusive, equitable, and fun for everyone. And it's almost like fireworks and magic that can happen in a newcomer space and perspective, bringing those opportunities to where they are at, quite often maybe a school or a community center. And working with them to figure out, what are those elements and pieces to ensure it's fun for everyone. That's Golan and a bit of the secret magic sauce there.
Excellent. Well, wonderful. Thank you so much for that, Kabir. And I just want to thank all of our wonderful presenters today, Wendy, Christina, Andrea, and Kabir. Thank you so much for sharing your stories, your knowledge, your wisdom. Just really appreciate you as a person and what you're doing in this world. And thanks to the audience too. Thank you for your attention and your thoughtfulness. We're so glad that you could join us today. And we will be following up with resources to support you in implementing the recommendations from the Families Getting Active report. There will be a survey. So please take a few minutes and fill that out because it helps us with planning future webinars. And we'll also include ways to keep in touch. So stay well, everyone. Be active and make some time to play and to have some fun. Thank you so much.